All right, so this is how to recreate a sill that you've taken out because of damage. So you see this thing is badly damaged. I have a piece of 3/4 inch thick MDF, so this is going to be paint grade, so you get a nice finish with a round over already on it, so it's bullnosed. And I'm going to use this as my template. I've already cut one straight line on this edge, so I have a reference edge. And then what I'm going to do is upside down, because I have these nails and I don't want to damage the surface or set this askew because it'll actually mess with the marks. Now I'm going to go ahead and butt this up right there. I'm going to make sure I have 0 lip. Okay, I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to make a tick mark with a fine point pen. Okay, just a Sharpie, nothing special, one that's been kicking around for years. All right, that's going to roll off onto the ground. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this off. I'm going to get my speed square and I'm going to mark this off from the backside forward. Obviously I'm gonna have to move this clamp, so I'm gonna have to do this in just a second. I'm gonna mark it off from the backside, flip it over, mark it off and meet in the middle from this side, and then I'll be ready to make my cut. All right, so I got my cut line. I have to do this two-handed, obviously, to make an accurate line. I'm gonna ride this inside line, and that's gonna be where my blade's gonna cut. My blade needs to be set on this side. So for reference, come on, pen. My blade needs to be on this side of this line to make sure I don't take off too much of this material. Now, this may be even up to a 1/16 extra material. I can always subtract, but you can't put back when it comes to these pieces of wood. So you're gonna expand your gap, which means you're probably gonna have a fat cock bead if you cut it too short. So stick with me on this. We're gonna make this cut and then we'll template the actual layout of this. We'll rip it down to size because this is in depth. It's way more, or width, I want to call it, than this, as you can see. So we'll template it, we'll rip it down, and then we'll use a jigsaw and cut this out, or even a flush cut saw at the end to make sure we have a crisp corner. Now here's a couple of pro tips I should mention while you're making your cuts. Make sure, and I know this should be obvious, but make sure that this back edge is flat against this fence so that your cuts don't end up crooked or your work piece coming out. Now, if you need to use your hold down of any type, like this one comes with its own, then what you're gonna do, if you are on a downhill, especially like I am, working in this yard, it's either downhill that way or it's gonna flip things over. So you can actually use the teeth and push the teeth down into the material, and will actually hold the material in place while you use your other hand to set this guy and get it tight. Now, as you can see, since this is my workpiece, I did not put the teeth and just jagged edge it right down into it, so I didn't damage that, but I just wanted to show you guys that. Another thing is, make sure that you pay attention to these edges when you're selecting where your cuts are. The reason why I start with a reference edge and make sure one side is flat is because you can actually get these edges where they get damaged and splayed, or the front of the bull nose is damaged, and you don't want that. So just take your time, be careful, and make sure that you line things up, keep your hands clear of the blade, and you'll be good to go. We're gonna rip down this material to this size. So I have my rip fence up, and what you want to have is this piece should be able to slide loosely but not sloppily. See that? I'm gonna tighten that up a little bit. This is good right here. That'll give you a nice tight fit. We'll rip this down and then we'll be closer to making our notches. Here's our piece that we're gonna end up notching the corners out of. And the one thing I do want to note is make sure that you ride this profile against a rip fence. because you don't want it getting cut off by the saw blade. I know this may sound logical, but we all make mistakes. And of course, the reason why I didn't shoot this, me cutting this on the table saw, is with the table saw, I always try to keep my focus on what I'm doing because I want to keep my digits. So let's move on. Okay, so here's the setup that I have going on here. Now I've already cut one corner out. Sorry, my neighbors were out, diesel truck, talking, you know, the whole number. I don't want to bore you with that. So I've clamped my piece off securely. Jigsaws especially, they can cause a lot of vibration. Obviously it's oscillating. So I'm going to cut this corner out, but make sure that you keep your clamps. Obviously clamp your workpiece, don't cut yourself or have your workpiece sling off. Make sure your clamps are away from interfering with this. I actually have this clamp over here for the other one. I had to move it over to the side because I couldn't get past it. Just something to check before you start your cut. There's nothing like not checking and you make that mistake. Okay, so this corner is already cut out. On the second one, I'm going to do this on the next part. And one thing I forgot to mention is the blade I'm using. Yes, I'm using a cheap jigsaw. It works great. I've had it for years. So don't go wasting your money on big stuff unless you need to. This is a fast and clean cut blade for the jigsaw. It does amazing work. If I swing over here, you can see it gets a very nice clean cut and it's very fast. So little pro tip. Now back to it. All right, there it is. Window sill. Now make sure that you seal this with a good primer. Give this probably at least a 220 grit sanding. Don't go crazy, but it has little fuzzies on MDF. The reason why I'm using MDF though is because it doesn't bleed through tannins, which pine has tannins. The oils in the wood come through. It will cause brown spots, but this will make a nice fine finish. And the other thing is, make sure you use a good quality paint that is the correct paint for where you're putting it. This is going to go in a wet area, so I want to make sure that I have a paint that will tolerate a wet area. Thank you for watching to the end. I really appreciate you. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe.